here we are with another Backyard Professor Live section with the Hey MH. How are you? That is your initials. Man, my glasses are getting bad and they're brand new. That's the problem with getting old, all right. So we're looking at combinations and puzzles. This weekend is Easter, by the way. And I'm going to have a really big tomorrow night presentation on Jesus and the resurrection. I'm going to take both sides and all that. I've been watching all kinds of videos and reading all kinds of stuff this last week on Jesus and the resurrection, because that is what Easter is supposed to be about. And so, but I'm one of those that likes to look on all sides. And so it'll be kind of fun. If you're interested, tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Hey, Bilaglavisup, how are you? So let's jump into this. We're going to do some more Queen Pawn declined, Queen Gambit declined. And we're going to see some of the cool ideas that can happen in this opening, because both players, standard development, but both of them are getting going pretty fast. And they are setting up so that they are as safe as they can be and ready to castle. Now, this is an interesting setup because it looks to me like white's going to castle more on the queen side and black is already castled on the king side. That could be a huge argy-bargy in one of my old books on, it's up here somewhere, on the old unused words. Argy-bargy is a ruckus, an argument, a give and take, WWF. That's an argy-bargy. That's what these guys are going to have. Woohoo! So, going to bring in more pieces, knight, bishop 3. And sure enough, if you're going to prepare to castle, then by all means, get the king out of there and let's keep on going. Rook is going to come to C1. And now he's going to, this is that black triangle that's so strong for black in most cases. So you'll notice that what enabled black to get his center strong with the pawns also gave white time enough to prepare to castle. So there's nothing really negative about this, but now that the bishop comes out, D will take the C pawn. He's going to release the tension early. And I say early, I don't know if it's early or not. Their development is going pretty well. White apparently doesn't see anything coming to the center just yet or on any of the wings. So he hasn't exactly castled yet. And that's all good. Knight D5. Now he's going to start attacking the center. So here comes the pressure to see who gets to have the center part of the board. And white says, before we take care of the center, there is something else that I want to take care of. I'm going to go ahead and exchange the bishop. And that makes sense because his bishop, his knight is poised over here for the king side. And that's not a bad idea. Now go ahead and castle. And again, it's a good idea to castle before you start attacking. And technically, it doesn't matter which wing you pick. And again, that depends on the board, of course. We all know that by now, but it's worth repeating because the trick with castling king side is you can't, it doesn't mean you can't attack the king side, but it does mean you might be limited depending on how locked the center is. You might be limited on throwing how many pawns up there you want to throw up there, right? So you got to be careful that way. So he castles, and now the knight is going to go ahead and take the knight. Now, instead of retaking with the bishop pawn, and that's, I mean, you have a few options here. One, you can ignore the attack, except it's hitting your queen, and that's a no-no. So you can retake with the pawn, which gives you central pawns, which is always good, sincerely. In this instance, he takes it with the rook. He wants to keep the he's going to use this partial open file instead of opening the file on the B when he retakes with a pawn instead. So it's all good. And now he's again, notice how they're focusing using the pawns and the pieces in the center. Pawn to E5 and now pawn to E4. So white is going to meet him. E will take the D, hitting the rook. It's not a crisis. Now you can retake with the knight, and this is kind of instructive here. It's not like it's a bad move. That's a great central knight. Now it's not on an outpost, but look at this. You can put him on an outpost and hit the queen. So, I mean, white had to have seen that retaking with the pawn to getting to the F5 is not bad. Maybe tantalize and induce black to push one of those king pawns forward in front of his king to create weaknesses. So that is an entirely viable option. In this instance, though, white chose to bring in yet another piece, and it's always good during the game, as we can count the pieces. The development obviously is on white side here. 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces developed compared to 2 of black. So what's the idea? When you see, now he's ahead piece development wise by at least 2 moves, right? So is it going to surprise us at all if white concocts some kind of an attack? It really shouldn't. It really shouldn't surprise us because we know that's exactly what's going to happen, right? So the queen takes the pawn. Now the rook will come to king 1, backing up the queen. And he goes ahead and pushes. Now he hasn't put either rook. This rook is already in play. He hasn't put the rook on the file yet, but he is thrusting through the center, giving him more space. That's the whole advantage of pawn moves through the center. When you can hot rod them to your opponent's side, then put the pedal to the metal and hot rod them to your opponent's side, because that gives you easier way to put your pieces in a better place on a more active square, is how they should say it. I should say it, to go get the king. So this is really interesting to see that thrust. And now the issue here is black takes it with the knight, and that doesn't work, because what happens? What did we see there? Black exchanged one of his active pieces, but now he's only got 2 active pieces instead of 3. And he's less developed than white. So, as a general play on things, you really don't want to start attacking unless you have more pieces developed. And again, it's a general rule. Once again, depending on where the pieces are, how active. That is, how close are your pieces to your opponent's king? That's activity. That's one way to determine activity, right? So he gladly swapped the active knight. And the queen will take the knight. And now a very interesting moment arises. He's got to watch out for a back rank checkmate. This is what's going on here. Did you notice that? He hasn't given any of these pawns Luft, as the Germans would say. He hasn't opened up an option to let the king out. So coming to here is a complete waste of time. One, you're not defended, and it's a checkmate. But notice something. The queen can come here and be sacrificed, and it's still a back rank checkmate. So white is right on the edge here. How do you prevent actively? And again, we want to stay away from being passive. Looks like there's quite a few folks in the chat. I want to say hi to everybody. Hey, S. Parker, how you doing? All right, good. So what's really interesting here is how he prevents the back rank. Rook, king 3. Nice. Very, very nice. Really, for real. That's cool. What this will do is force an exchange of the queens, because the queen's not going to take the rook. You're not going to lose your queen for the rook. So that forces black to exchange the queens. And then, ta-da! What I just pointed out to the white side is now the black side problem. Checkmate. He didn't. Now, don't worry about the queen. It's not about the queen. It's about winning the game. So that is a really cool little little exercise to keep in mind. And everybody, I say everybody, but most of us on the lower levels fall prey to the back rank checkmate. I do. Everybody does. So it's just good to review and understand. Keep your eyes on the way to prevent it through good development and care in pawn play, especially once you castle. So that was kind of fun. Let's see what else we got on the agenda. Yeah, baby. We're going to do an agenda today. How about that? Okay, so hang on. Let me get my pen. I thought I had my pen over here. I want to get my pen here so I can mark this off. Really kind of cool that Easter Eve. And we are playing chess. Now, that's dedication. I'm just saying. Hey, Kurt Parker, good to see you too, buddy. All right, let's take another look at another one. Queen's Gambit again. D4, D5, C4, E6. Absolutely. Knight out on the king side. King side knight coming out. And that immediately prompts. And it's not like this is the only move. In this particular book that I'm using, Irving Chernev's Chess Traps, Winning Chess Traps, there's a lot of ways to develop here. You don't have to just always push that bishop out, although in the opening it really doesn't hurt. But you can already bring your knight out. If you really wanted to emphasize the center, you could bump the king pawn and the f pawn as far as that goes. I don't know about the f pawn, though. The f is forget about it. Remember that. You start opening stuff like this, and then you've got stuff like this when the queen comes in, and then you're moving your king and losing your castling privileges. And if the bishop comes crashing in, that gets ugly quick. So be careful with the f pawn without question. So what was I lying about? Knight, king, bishop 3 came. So that's one option. But the bishop knight 5 is a very, very popular way to do it. And of course, he's going to knock off the pin, because that is a pin which affects the two central squares, E4 and D5. So you want to make sure you understand the implications of him stopping the block. Now the knight does go back to influencing those. Sometimes we can get in trouble if we forget the meaning of that bishop coming out to stop that block, right? What that also does is it gives him a chance to move the knight and or the queen as far as that goes. And by getting ready, what he's doing here, and this is it's a flexible move, it's a safe move, because he's opening up his bishop and he does want a castle. The light squared bishop on white, right? So this is all good, the way he's opening, and black is going to castle. When you prepare to castle. That is just the best way to do. Knight, bishop 3. Now, he's going to be in Kettle, which is going to make this kind of interesting. Kind of cool. And white goes ahead and says, okay, so white doesn't see this as an advantage. And so he goes ahead and releases the tension in the center. He says, all right, I'm relatively decently developed at this point, and I can continue my development so that I can castle and get away with putting the king out of danger, right? But in the meantime, I'm good with releasing the tension in the center. And then the E will retake the D. Notice the reason of releasing the tension in the center. He didn't just take the pawn to take the pawn. That's not what's going on here. This limits the black fianchettoed bishop when he fianchettos, because now those center pawns are just button heads. So that is an important foresight for him to say, not only do we maintain structure in the center, but we limit one of his pieces. That could have a really powerful look into the castled kingside when white castles. So that's a good exchange. There's times, and I know this just comes with experience. You got to see what, you got to try to see, what happens if I take this pawn or take that piece in the center. There's times when you want to leave the tension. This makes sense why he went ahead, and he's not fully developed. And I know I make a big deal about that because everybody else does too. This is how the grandmasters win, and the masters and the international masters, and even some of us lowly folk. But if you're not fully developed, you want to be real careful about taking pawns in the center and opening up the position. In this instance, it did not open up the position. It closed down the position for the bishop. Now, recognize also, it really did give the C file a partial open file for white, though. So I say it didn't open up the position, but in a way it did. But he's intending on keeping that pawn stuck for that reason. And it's very interesting. Now I can't remember castles. Knight, bishop 3, pawn, queen, knight 3, pawn takes pawn, pawn takes pawn. Now it's bishop, queen 3. So now he can get ready safely, and he doesn't feel the need to have to castle either. So he's going to go ahead and keep his development. And now this is the, here we go. Bishop, king, knight 5. You prepared to fianchetto. And this is one of those examples. So I'm glad I'm playing through this because I did this in a game and I got trounced. And then the person I was playing, I believe it was a really high-rated gal, she said, okay, now I'm going to teach you something here, so pay attention. She was a very serious competitor. I believe she was a master. I don't think she was a grandmaster, but she was a master. And she said, whenever you prepare to fianchetto, 99 out of 100 times, you're better off fianchettoing, because what you're doing by the pawn push is creating weak squares. All the white squares now are weak on the queen side of black. So to prepare to fianchetto, and then all of a sudden say, hey, now that the bishop's developed, I can go ahead and put that pin to the knight on the queen, that's not quite accurate. That does not work, and we'll see why. He steps out of the pin. Yes, he accomplishes something else. He presents a good battery against 8-7. Not that he's going to do that, but that diagonal is a sweet diagonal. Now black must realize, okay, where white put the queen, I can see in the future, if he desires, the bishop now is going to take that knight, because that knight's the protector of 8-7. And any time you can either take or induce a kingside pawn structure to move forward, 9 out of 10 times, that's a weakening situation. So you can kind of get a gist, you can get a feel for what white's thinking here. And this is really cool how he plays through this. And that move makes sense, doesn't it? Based on what I just said. Black is seeing what white is doing. He's saying, all right, well, you're going to want to take the knight. But I am going to replace the knight, and then you won't have your dark squared bishop. So this is getting good. The knight, now that the queen is moved, he's going to keep the knight, right? Because he knows that white squared bishop's out of place. He's going to keep that knight, and he's going to use that knight, putting it to a much, much more active square. That's a sweet spot, man. E5. Anytime you can get the knight d5, that's a sweet spot. So now the bishop has to, so you see what happens. White wasted that move, and he wasted that second move, and now he's truly behind in being able to coordinate his pieces in a defense, because it's obvious white's going to want to attack. So this is really important to see, and sure enough, as sugar sweet, knight b6. What a knight fork on the queen and the bishop. Very good. Yeah, the knight's dangerous. You've got to be careful of where the knight can move. So the queen is going to move out of danger, of course. Absolutely. So instead of taking advantage at this point of that bishop, he comes to here. Bishop, queen, rook 6. And you're going, all right, he's going to win the exchange. It kind of looks like a weird move, but bishop, knight 7 is where he's wanting to go, right? So he comes here to rook 6, and now the knight comes back to knight 1. Good fork. Knight is going to instead take the bishop check. The queen is going to take the knight, and now the bishop to knight 7. He wins the exchange. Fascinating, isn't it? That is so interesting how that works. So that's another fun Queen Gambit Declined combination idea on how to develop, on what to think about, where to coordinate your pieces so that they're on the most active squares. The activity, I would think piece activity is truly one of the important points in a game of chess that you do want to keep firmly and foremost in your mind. The more active you can make your pieces, and the more of your pieces that you can make active, including the pawns, the better, the more powerful game you're going to be able to play. And so this is very helpful to see how activity does affect the situation. All right. We're having fun now. Okay, so, and here we go again. Now, this also is an extremely interesting d4, d5, c4, e6. Typical. Queen knight out, king knight out. Now, here, again, like I told you last time, you always have this option of putting up the bishop to put the pin on, but this time he's going to develop with the other knight and the challenge to the center. Now, this is going to be cool to see. C will take, and the knight will take, and the pawn will hit the knight, so the knight will continue. At this point, you really can't do anything but go forward, right? You can't, this really does not help you. It really does. You're going to be moving the knight a lot if you start doing stuff like this, right? And that's going to put you behind in development and activity. And the other thing you got to keep in mind is if you start doing that, look at that powerful pawn center white has. See, the black d pawn is gone now. So realizing that black can continue thrusting forward, and both those pawns are backed up by both those knights. So that's not the type of setup you would want to give your opponent if you can at all help it. That is why, that's one reason. I would propose that's the main reason. That is why bumping back is not the way to play this, and black does not play it that way. Go forward and go ahead and get the knight off the board, because the center of white is going to become overwhelming, truly. So take the knight. That makes sense. Black knight takes the knight, and the pawn, this time the pawn will take the knight because it's the only one that can do it. And now black brings out the knight. So, and here we go. And this is just exactly what I was saying. That center of white is really powerful. When you have the two center pawns and it's backed up by pieces, that's the way to do it. It almost plays itself in a way. You don't even have to really try to figure out, all right, what next? That's what's next. Keep pushing. Yeah, without question. And the knight to king 2, the going back, see, now he's in trouble. You would have been better off to exchange the pawns, because now the bishop comes to knight 5 check, and the bishop will of course be there, develop with tempo perhaps. However, he's going to swap the bishops. Queen takes bishop, and now the knight, and this is with tempo. So again, he gained the space. He's moving his pieces to a more active square with tempo. Now this gives white the initiative. The queen will try to stay developed. Now it's a good attempt at getting to a more active square. That's nice. You notice that would have simply been ridiculous. No, you got your queen out. Keep her out. That would have been less good. The more forward you come, the more active your piece is. That is, look at the diagonal that the queen can control and the file, the partial file. So she's much stronger here than any of these retreat squares. That's why I say keep your pieces active. That's always a good thing to do. So I just wanted to point that out. And white's going to take the pawn. Now he's breaking in. He's breaking down the center. And he's breaking into the king because he hasn't castled yet. Right? So if your opponent's king is going to stay in the center, the best thing you can do is break open the center. Now, as opposed to that last game, where he was going to fianchetto his bishop, but white exchanged the pawns to limit the bishop, so he went out the other way, right? In this instance, he opens up the center, which is going to get the king, right? So here we go. This is good. Queen rook comes to knight 1. And I think that is so much fun. That is so much fun. At this point, hold on, am I doing this right? Yeah, I'm doing that right. Pawn takes the pawn, pawn takes the pawn. Yeah, queen, rook, knight 1, and now he goes to rook, queen 1. So, shall we take the queens? And when you see this type of a setup, start thinking tactics. You say, all right, okay, hold on, this is getting interesting. Queen takes the rook check. This is so cool how this happens. King takes the queen, and now rook takes the queen. Did you notice what white did? White went ahead And instead of being passive about it, instead of just a queen swap, white gets a rook by attacking, then the queen and a queen. So white's up a piece, 3 pieces to 4, and he'll go on to win the game. So that's kind of a cool little tactic to keep in mind. You always want to be active and you always want to be aggressive. Hey, Ken Brown, good to see you, brother. All right, glad you could make it. We're just doing some Queen Gambit declined a little bit. Tomorrow night, 6 o'clock, here on this channel on StreamYard, I'm going to be doing an Easter presentation for those of you who are interested in Easter. If you're not, it's all good. Doesn't matter. I'm going to be doing a look at the scriptural justification that is used for Jesus's resurrection. And I'm going to also be looking at some of the objections of how the scriptures are used. It's really kind of fun. I'm one of those that believe in looking at all sides. So it'll be fun for me to just explore a little bit on that subject since it is Easter, and happy Easter to everyone. Hope you all had a good Friday yesterday if you do that. All righty, let's look at one more of these little jewels. Set this thing up fast so that I don't waste your time. Okay, hold on. Did I get that written down? Where is it? Oh, yeah. There we go. That's the one I want. That one. And now this one. Okay, so what we want to do is recognize that in openings, you do want to, to an extent, you have to memorize some chess openings. You're just not going to get away from that. You're not going to get out of that at all. You have to learn openings. One way or another, you have to learn openings. That's how it's going to work. And in fact, I want to present something. Yeah. About learning openings. What do you think? It's really important because there's such a thing as book openings, and then there's such a thing as, you always have to pay attention to the nature of the board. Yeah. But you always have options. There's a million ways you can go right and a million ways you can go wrong. There's no question about that. So you do develop the ability to see some kinds of patterns and systematic repeats up to a point. And then if your opponent makes a move that is out of order, perhaps there's a way you can capitalize on that. That's one reason why openings are so important to study. And my suspicion is that in absolutely every opening, there are always going to be traps, problems, and issues to deal with. So here again, now this is the second time. So we've seen a pattern. We've seen numerous games where before he'll develop the knight, he bops the bishop out to here to pin the knight to the queen. When white brings out the knight like this, now this is the second game where we've seen black push the c pawn. So just so you're aware that this is another way to push the opening, and now he puts the pin. You'll notice that so many times it's more important to get as much out on active squares, pawns and pieces. It's much better to get your pieces activated on active squares than it is to worry about, well, do I take that pawn or not? In a lot of cases, not all cases, but in a lot of cases, that's what you want to pay attention to. So rather than pawn hunting, it's more valuable to maintain your development. And that's what we see. Well, C will take the D, and that makes sense. And the knight will take the D. That makes sense. And now pawn king 4. So in a way, aren't we seeing just the opposite of what we saw in the last game? Because now it's black who has the 2 central pawns, and he's pushing. This has given black extra space in order to manipulate and maneuver. So let's see how white handles this. He's going to bop the knight back to bishop 3, but black, it's hard to, this is where experience, you just got to play a lot. This is where experience will come into play, because now you're overextending. Now, what's the problem here? What's part of the problem here? He's only got 1 piece out. It's better to get your pieces out before you start attacking, right? It's 3 pieces to 1 at this point. Black should have held back, or at least pushed pawn queen 5. Queen 5 was even better. So, and here's the issue. Because white has a better development, he can put together a much stronger threat than black can with just his pawns. That's why he can ignore the attack to his knight. Isn't that amazing? And black learns a lesson the hard way. Knight takes knight check. You see what's coming? This is really cool to see this. Pawn takes the knight. Queen takes the queen. Check. There's the intermezzo move. There's the in-between move. The king takes the queen. No choice. And now the bishop takes the pawn. Check. Forks the rook. King moves anywhere he wants. And you got your rook. So the reason, again, and it's such a simple thing, maybe that's why myself and so many overlook this, is because it's such a simple thing to, when you look back at that position, he only had 3 of his pieces developed. All right, so it wasn't that far ahead. It was not that big of a deal. Black, true, he was underdeveloped, just the 1 knight. But because of just having the 2 extra pieces, it became a matter of strength through activity with 2 pieces. Sacrifice the knight. That doesn't matter. You still got 2 pieces, the bishop and the knight, to coordinate in order to get up the exchange. That's fun stuff. That I'm just saying, that's fun stuff. So once again, this is one of the cool illustrations of why, without question, we want to. Speedy development is how Nimzowitsch put it. And one of 2 of the greatest practitioners of this was, well, 3, all of the former world champions, but Botvinnik was especially strong in putting his rooks on open files. But Gary Kasparov and Magnus Carlsen today, they always put their pieces out there right now, immediately, pronto, with no questions asked. They just hot-foot it. So let's see what happens when the shoe is on the other foot. Let's see if black has a way. Of course he does. I mean, it's up to us to play the game well, right? So that you don't get clobbered all the time. But let's see what happens if white now doesn't play the opening as well as he could or should. We'll do this example, then I'm going to let you go. We've got Easter prep and all that jazz to do, and you don't want to spend the whole day of Easter watching me play chess. What's that? You mean you do? Oh, well, that's very nice. However, I push the limit here. So here we go. Queen Gambit declined. Let's take one more look at one more really fascinating idea for black that is so important to recognize. And once again, we see at this point, we know there's many options. Bishop out, bump the knight. You can actually bump a center pawn, etc. In this instance, white will put the knight. There's one of the patterns of one of the opening, the book openings in the Queen Gambit Declined. If you're playing the black and your opponent does bop both of the knights out first before putting that bishop out there as the pin, then you can immediately strike the center once again strongly. That can give you a better way to equalize at least. So let's see how he plays this. That usually does induce, this is one option, it will induce white to bop the bishop out there. And you always take from C to D. You take from C to D, and the knight will take the pawn, and then you hit the knight. So we've seen this before. We hit the knight, and here the knight will come to queen 5, to knight 5, b5. So this is going to be interesting because now black can build up a tempo. Black can now, and it's a more active square. We've been through this before. We almost get this every game, don't we? It is the most active square to go to, man. B5. Who wouldn't want to have their knight on B5? Well, black, that's who. So he is, of course, going to say, well, let's see what you want to do. And now taking the pawn, the center pawn that way, is very interesting because pawn will take the knight, which opens up the rook file, and the knight will take the knight check. We've seen this before. This is very interesting, except for this difference. Now, you remember the last one where it was the pawn that took the knight. But what happens if the queen takes the knight? This is why we keep coming back to this game. Chess. You sack the queen and it makes it so much greater, like Coach Andrus says. Man, if you're not calculating out when you have candidate moves, or if you're checking for your checks, your captures, your threats, etc. If you're not calculating the line with the queen being sacrificed, you're not looking far enough. I love that approach because it just changes how much more fun it is to sack the queen and come out on top. So rather than being Mickey Mouse with the pawn exchange, queen comes in. Yeah, baby. That's what I'm talking about. So the bishop takes the queen, of course. Don't worry about the bishop. Who cares? Let it be there because there's something more important to do. See, and isn't this a habit we all get into? True story, man. Well, he took me, so I have to take him. We're in an exchange. He takes, I take, he takes, I take. Oh, hey, we're even. This is the pattern. This is the habit that we get into, right? Well, the queen took my knight and my bishop was defending the queen. So I'm going to take the queen. Well, the bishop took my queen, so I'm going to retake the bishop. See that pattern? Well, let's see if there's another move we could do. And this is why you always want to, I'm saying this for myself, but you always want to stand back, sit back, and go, all right, what's next? What can I do that's better? And there is something. Bishop Knight 5 check. The only way he gets out of checkmate is with the queen. So now black says check. King will, of course, take the bishop. And now, because you did an intermezzo move, now you can take the bishop and you're piece up. You won the exchange. So this is a really interesting point when we get in that. Oh, well, let's see. He takes, I take. Oh, yeah, he took me, so I've got to take him. Oh, he took and then I took. There, and now everything's even. Rather than being satisfied with an even exchange, calculate out with an extra move that your opponent, a forcing move, is even better, that your opponent has to respond to, and take that out all the way, and then retake a piece. And you end up getting a piece ahead. Fun stuff. That is a terrific tactic. That's a really important one to try to keep our eyes on, see if we can make it work. So, all right, you guys. Hey, I'm at 45 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I appreciate you guys showing up. I appreciate all your support, your love, your help. It's fun playing chess with you. It's fun showing you some of these traps and all. I want you to all have a happy Easter. I am going to be live tomorrow night, 6 o'clock on Easter program, scripture study about Jesus and the resurrection. If you care to show up, great. If not, no big deal. I will try to produce more chess videos. And if I can't, it's all good, because I will see you guys next week here, Backyard Professor live in the morning. And I try like crazy to do this in the morning at 10 o'clock if I can, because that's the easiest way. So let me see where there it is, right there. I've got an ending slide I'll leave you with. I appreciate all you guys. I'll catch up to you soon. This is me closing out.